Welcome to Nacht Waffen Pilot with Penny Bradley. Today we have returning guest Matt Tracy, and we have a set of things that we want to discuss because they've kind of fallen through the cracks in some of the other things, and we have 2 hours to talk about them. Welcome, Matt.
Hi.
When we were talking earlier today, you brought up about that you had had an insight into how the crystal drive engines function. You want to start off with that?
Sure. I started remembering this functioning. I was thinking about those Navy patents, but then everything started moving towards, I started remembering this red crystalline. It was like the diodes in a laser. And what was happening was the electric current was creating photons, light inside the diode, just like in a laser diode. But they were bombarding this outer wall that was surrounding the diode. Looked like some kind of piezoelectric type of material that when the light hit it, it started vibrating at extremely high frequencies. And then that was further had a electrically conductive coating over that. And the outer coating was charged to a high voltage static current. And the extremely high frequencies was interacting with that electric current, magnifying the current, vibrating the electric field of that voltage. Just like it reminded me a lot of the Navy patents that were going out, you know, the Pius effect and all that stuff. But it didn't use plasmas or microwave generators. It used laser diodes interacting with some kind of material that interacts with light, and when light hits it, it converts it to mechanical vibration. I know there are crystals that will do that. I know there are piezoelectric crystals that when you insert an electric current to, they will create a vibration. But then there's also crystals, and I don't remember what this process is called, but if you insert light into it, it will create a vibration. Or if you apply pressure to it, it will emit light.
Well, I've dealt with things when I took physics in college that
right. I don't remember the names.
Those things. Yeah, I can't. I was in college in the 80s. Come on. Remembering names is like, whoa, this was 40 years ago. So
what I saw was it looked like one of those double coned spinning tops like you find in the Otis T car X1 craft designs. Those things.
Oh, speaking of, have you interacted with Drudell? He has a website where he takes apart the Otis T car.
Yeah, we interact every once in a while. We agree on a lot of stuff, not so much on some things.
Well, he's
but
kind
we do
of
agree on a lot of stuff. And
backed off since he got married and they have a baby.
right,
So
I've researched his stuff, and we interact. Not so much since he's gotten married, but yeah. Um, yeah, basically every engine operates under similar principles. Every electrogravitic engine. What you're doing is trying to create an oscillation within the field that you're creating, whether it be through spin or through vibration or a combination of both, which the greater the spin or greater the spin or vibration, when it reaches a certain point, it will start to repel things. Not just matter, but other fields will no longer be able to terminate onto the matter that makes up the craft. The field is oscillating at a frequency so high that the other fields surrounding it, like that of the Earth's fields, electric, magnetic, and gravitational fields, just don't terminate. They don't met through the field, and so they slipstream around. And that's where cancellation of gravity comes in.
okay.
And then from there, you can use different methods of moving the craft. More basic methods would be some kind of rocket motor. But you can also manipulate that field to create kind of pushing and pulling effect along a trajectory.
When I was driving, for lack of a better term, one of those ships, it was the effect of that particular field was that there was like a gravity well in front of where the direction we were headed. And so it was literally you were falling into this well, and the well itself would be moving. So it was a really strange sensation that took some time to get used to. So
yeah, the stronger fields that are capable of entering hyperspace, they move away from mechanical propulsion add-ons because they don't work in hyperspace.
no, they don't.
Only field manipulation works in hyperspace. I think this is what I'm remembering is of the TR10 engine. I see that spinning top, and it's in the shape of some kind of diode. It looks red, and then it's coated in a kind of like vibrating piezoelectric substance over that, and then over that is a electrically conductive coating that is then charged to a high voltage. This object is made to spin at an extremely high RPM rate, and then current is applied to the inner diode, which creates light, which normally if you gave it an out would create a laser beam, but it just bounces off on the inside, bounces off the piezoelectric surfaces on the outer walls of that jewel, as it is, and then that creates the extremely high vibrations that's then applied to that high voltage electric field. Those extremely high vibrations and that extremely high spin rate creates the disconnect. the electric fields and the magnetic fields surrounding the craft that the craft travels through are then slowly begin to slipstream around the craft, no longer terminating onto the matter that is the craft. And as that increases, inertia and the effect of gravity's pull decrease. When you reach a 100% elimination of all surrounding magnetic and electric fields, being able to terminate onto the matter of the craft, when that is reduced to absolute zero, is when you blip out into hyperspace.
Now that sounds familiar, because we would blip into hyperspace, and as the navigator, which I know you also function as, the ship would be in what would be experienced as a tunnel. Mm-hmm. And inside that slipstream, as you describe it, everything feels like normal space, but outside of it, you're no longer in real 3D normal space. You're in a different realm. It's basically what the psychic people are referring to as astral. Mm-hmm. And it's the only real place out there where you don't have planets or rocks or things to fly through. So it's really the only safe place to travel. But even so, as you travel through the astral, you're leaving these holes like termites in wood. You're leaving these holes that.
Well, that's what a wormhole is.
Yeah. So, so there's a whole system of these holes that are there and have been there for a very long time, and the Galactic folks have been encouraging us to use holes that are already there, so that rather than build new ones.
Yeah, there are pre-existing ones, and they will actually their exit can actually move depending on the alignment of the planets between two star systems. Basically, all stellar bodies will cause these things to move around, and you've got to really map out the whole celestial system to know where the entrance is and where the exit is.
Yeah. Yeah, the gravity of the star, the plasma currents coming off the star, and because most of people on Earth don't understand that the universe is electric rather than gravity or they don't realize that the polarity between the star and the planets surrounding it also affects where these things will come out. And the relationship, usually a solar system will have everybody in the same lineup, and then you'll get something from outside that their polarity is different, and you can basically watch every planet in that system flip to match the polarity of the outsider. And it's interesting from the outside, but it's disastrous for any people who live on those worlds, because they're flipping literally in space. And yeah,
Yeah.
reality out there is very different than what people here think it is.
The when you get a wormhole that's strong enough, you start to be able to see it with infrared and ultraviolet imaging systems, even magnetic and electric imaging field imaging technology. The ones that get that strong, where our modern day technology can actually visually make out, those are pretty stable. Enough to, because they're so big, they take so long to shift and move around. Those are usually the ones that go between galaxies. There's one outside of our Oort cloud that goes all the way to the next galaxy over. What is that? Andromeda, I think.
Yeah, Andromeda is the closest.
Yeah.
And Andromeda
It terminates on Andromeda.
Andromeda is on a collision course with the Milky Way. It's not expected to be for another billion years, but those who navigate between are having to adjust for the distance being shorter over time.
Yeah. And that current wormhole is probably the most stable, not moving. It's staying outside of, I think it's only a few hundred AU outside of our Oort cloud.
Yeah, it's part of why we get so many visitors here.
It's basically the hardest part would be just reaching it, you know. Using gravity engines, it could still take hours and in some cases days just to reach that particular wormhole from Earth.
But then once you're in it, you go where you're going.
Once you're in it, you will traverse between this galaxy and Andromeda in less than an hour.
Well, then I'm wondering where I was going that it took weeks to get there in hyperspace.
It also depends on when you were going, like what time, because that can affect your personal perception of the travel time. And it's not a manipulation of your perception as much as traveling through space and time is a little bit different than in hyperspace than in normal space. Also, it depends on the different kinds of hyper engines. If you're not using a already existent wormhole, if you're charting your own right there in that moment, you'll get more resistance, and you won't be able to travel as fast as one that's already existing and has already been traversed thousands and millions of times. Okay. You get far less resistance in an already existing wormhole if you're going to traverse that one. If you're charting your own course through hyperspace, thus creating your own brand new wormhole, you get more resistance.
Okay, that makes sense.
You also,
because I've been hearing these times like hours, and I know I experienced trips that were weeks.
Yeah.
And so it's like we had to have
also keep in mind that
navigator because it was shift work and we were gone longer than one person could stay awake.
Also keep in mind, we are not simply operating in this galaxy. The Germans are operating in, I think, 3 other galaxies. They have a few colonies, not many, just a handful of colonies across about 3 other galaxies.
Yeah, they really wanted to get away.
Well, they left the galaxy and went into those other galaxies literally to act as a buffer between the operations of the Galactic Authority. The Galactic Authority only has the jurisdiction inside this galaxy.
Yeah.
And
The
they can't say anything or do anything with the Germans that have colonies outside of this galaxy.
the galactic, for the audience, the Galactic Authority is the government of the core, and they are a level 4 civilization. Their abilities would seem godlike to your average human on Earth, and they have decided that Terrans, which is what they call us, are a threat to the other life forms in the galaxy, and they are bringing us all back to inside the Oort cloud, and they're starting with those that are furthest away from Earth first, and basically just pulling us all back in. Now, they have no authority outside the Milky Way, and the ones that are the furthest out at the moment are the Germans, and then the next ones are the group that is called by at least 4 different names, but is basically the military industrial complex. And Solar Warden really hasn't gone very far. So there are military mercenary groups that are out there, at least 2 that we know of. And most of what we know about what's going on outside our own faction is because the veterans are in these groups together and we're sharing information. So I used to be an admin in a group that had 3,000 members, and probably half of us were actually veterans. And no, those people are not all public. Out of those, maybe 50 of us are public. But we had people from all of the major factions and probably a couple of hundred minor factions. And so that's how we got the information about the groups we're not in. Matt and I both served as navigators in Nacht Waffen, along with whatever else we did while we were out there. So we do have that in common. We actually served on the same ship together that was commanded by Joseph Powell. That was the trip where I blew up his head because of sexual harassment. And yeah, the 3 of us get along fine here. There are other folks who are public who were also part of that trip. Will Glover is one of them. Yeah, there's a lot of us out there. And for those of you who missed our Montauk 2.0 roundtable, CIA archivist Doris Neely did verify that Matt Tracy, along with everyone else who was on the roundtable, all had files that she uploaded. She didn't go into a lot of details publicly, but she did spend several hours talking with Matt after the roundtable, talking about things that he had done that she knew about because she uploaded his file. So the public is going to have to understand that we're not a bunch of fakes, that the people I've been interviewing, many of them are now verified as there's a file with the CIA with their name on it. So you're going to have to change your perceptions of some of us. So once you're verified by a CIA archivist, you're no longer in the iffy category, and people need to adapt to that. So How does it feel to get outside verification?
Uh, honestly, I don't feel any different.
I was kind of in shock when it happened for me, and it took three videos with 3 episodes with her to finally get my story as I remembered it verified. And when it finally happened, it was like, it wasn't like it was a major accomplishment. It was like, okay, that's done. But I found that it makes a difference with some of the people out there, that they're giving me more credibility now. But I'm still telling the same story I was all along.
Exactly. I mean, it's like nothing has changed on my end. So it's like I don't feel any different. Just, that would probably be for everybody else's sake.
Yeah. I know it made a difference at the conference that I spoke at in November. It made a real difference to the audience that I had actually been verified. And that I flat out said, just because I'm verified doesn't mean that anybody else is fake. Because I know that I wasn't the only one out there. You can't have an army of one, regardless of what the US military says. Armies have to have lots of people. That's the way they function.
Yep.
So it's nice to know I'm not the only one out there with a verification stamp. Yeah, it's going to be interesting in October, whenever that Matt, no, you're not there. I'm sorry. Joseph and James and I are all going to be on a panel together, and we've all been verified. So it's like, okay. And that was especially important for James because of the attack following the last conference. That was pretty chicken shit. So
I don't know what happened. So.
Oh, we had an infiltrator come in and deliberately set up James. He lied to him. And James is usually a pretty trusting soul. If you tell him you did something, he'll take your word for it until proven otherwise. So he gives everybody the opportunity to be heard and lets the viewer use their own discretion. And this man came in and abused that. And he has 250,000 followers on YouTube. And so he's saying that we're all a bunch of fakes. There is always, anytime that you are trying to accomplish something, there's always going to be somebody who makes it their life's goal to tear you apart. And that's what this man is doing. He's making money off of a monetized channel, making fun of other people and their pain. So I'm not going to name him. I've named too many names lately. So I don't normally do that, but we're going to skip over that I said that. Okay, the last attempt we had at recording this, we had someone ask you about altars, and he was going about it in a almost insulting manner, but you came up with a really good explanation of how altars are created and why they don't share memory. And if you can remember any of that, I'd like for you to go into that again. That was
okay.
That was the best explanation I've ever heard. So I'm hoping you can recover that.
I guess for starters, should probably start with the reason you can only create alternate personalities between the ages of birth and 7 years old.
Yeah.
During that time of a child's life, there is no beta or alpha brainwaves. You are entirely in theta. It is in theta brainwaves that you're basically operating entirely on instinct. Don't really understand past, present, and future. You don't understand abstract things. Everything's concrete information, and everything's in the moment information. And it's in that state, it's in the theta state is where if you are put in a dire situation that you cannot remove yourself from, you can't run away, you can't die, can't kill yourself, eventually that subconscious mind will begin to wall off what's happening from the rest of the mind to defend itself. This is a defense mechanism. A wall will be created, and what's inside that wall is still a part of you. But when that part is up in the forefront, it will begin to form its own personality. And it can be completely different personality from the rest of the mind. This is what a fracture is when your mind is fractured, this is what it means. And that personality can then also be fractured even more and more and more. To a degree, a little over 2,000. 13 by 13 by 13 grid is what I've heard from multiple sources, you included.
Yeah, that originally came from Stuart Swerdlow. He has a book that he called 13 Cubed, and I found that it matched what I knew of my alters. So I'm pretty sure that was the basic plan of how they approached mind fracturing all of us, at least up to the point where he was operating.
The methods they used was, they did all kinds of stuff to me. They raped me repeatedly in every fashion until I just shut down. They also put me in a dog kennel that was, the inside was just wrapped in chicken wire, and they electrocuted the chicken wire so that you can't get away from the electrocution. No matter what you're doing, you're being electrocuted. And it's intense. They did all kinds of stuff. They would drug me. I don't know how many times they did this, but I know of at least one time where they drugged me heavily. And under drugs, I was somehow coerced into eating someone. You know, I don't know what imagery they created that caused me to do it, but I know that when the drugs wore off, suddenly I'm having to live with this, and that just broke me even further. That created alters, multiple alters right there on the spot. My brain couldn't take it.
With me, this was one of the things that made me believe that my memory download was real, was because I had been having nightmares about this for literally decades before my memories were activated. but I had been nailed inside a wall and left to suffocate. And it presented as a nightmare of an ugly little girl being put into the wall and expected to crawl through, and like a squirrel or something. And that's what the nightmare had been. But the reality had been I had been nailed inside a hole in the wall and left to die. And they would pull me out and resuscitate me. And that
I
happened over and over and over. They never do any of these things to you just once. They do
They
them
will do
until
it as many times as until that activity stops creating alters.
exactly. And they may go back after they've tried something else and go back to that and see if it works again, because sometimes it does.
I do remember when they put needles under my fingernails and electrocuted me that way. I also remember being unable to move on a metal table, and they cut open my stomach and started playing with my insides with no anesthesia.
Well, when I was first at Langley, the first thing they did was they took this 4-year-old girl, me, and put me head first into a tub of water. And they would drill me over and over and over until that stopped working. And I eventually later on figured out that they were trying to teach me to breathe in the water, because that's the way the regen tanks in with the Germans worked, is you breathe in the gel while you're in them.
It's my understanding that everybody that deals with the regen tank technology was done to them.
Yeah. The Germans used the regen tanks. They are a Manted Empire technology that the Americans don't have. And it's why the Germans don't use clones. Because if you put a clone into a regen tank, when the person comes out, you have the clone's mind instead of your asset's mind. So it's pretty much useless as far as they're concerned. You have to be in your natural body to be able to use the regen tank. If you're using the med beds, they don't mess with the mind at all. So you can spend however long you want on the med bed technology, and you will come back with the asset in charge, just like they were when they first came there. But they can't bring you back from the dead either, and the regen tanks can. So there's differences in the technologies. From listening to assets, the survivors, the people like us, each faction has its own sets of technologies from different extraterrestrials. And what they do to us is based on the technology they have access to. So the Americans have access to technology that it doesn't matter if you're a clone or not. So they put all of you into a clone body, and a clone body is good for 25 years. So they keep you for 20. That way they don't have to deal with that time period where the clone pushes you out. So, so it makes sense to them, because that way they're not messing with your physical body. But something about the process makes those people still get sick 20 years after. So I don't know what the process is that they do, but the people who come back from the American programs 20 years later, they're sick. And usually another 10 years or so, and they're
Started getting sick early on around puberty.
well, I started getting sick when they first brought me back. When I was, 4 years old. I've had health issues ever since. And in my 20s, I got sick with an autoimmune disorder. And in my 40s, I got even more so. If you look through my medical file, I've had 5 times that I've been completely disabled and worked my way back to being able to work full time again. And this last time I just couldn't. The disabilities were too overwhelming. And
Right.
so, the stuff they do to us makes us sick. It makes our minds broken. We come back and we're a mess. And people shock me because they want to be one of us.
I know these people that are just playing a game. It's almost like they're doing, what is that, larping?
Yeah.
They really bother me. It's like, why would you want to experience this shit?
Well, it's the same as the people who pretend to be Earth military veterans. Why? Why?
Right.
You do you really want to have gone into war and had to kill people? Because that's what we have to do out there.
Did you really want to watch, your friends right next to you's heads explode?
Yeah. On a good day.
Right.
They're lucky if they died. And that's something else that people don't understand is you get to this point where you think they're lucky because they died. They're done. Except that this technology the Germans have will bring you back from the dead. So you're never done. Never.
And with the military industrial complex, you're pretty much in a clone body. When that clone body dies, that consciousness, like a rubber band, gets snapped back to its original body, which is currently in that moment in stasis.
Mm-hmm.
And then all they do is pull you back out of stasis, remove it again, put it in another clone body, put that body back in stasis.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're basically quantum entangled between your original body and this clone body. You are artificially, what's the word? Possessing.
Yeah, you're because the clone is made from your cells. You are quantum entangled. And you
Yes.
can see that same effect between identical twins on Earth because they were originally one egg and sperm.
Right.
So when they split into 2 people, it's the same process. So this is why I keep getting so angry about people that talk about soulless clones. They're not.
There's no such thing.
There's no such thing.
When
It's your identical twin that you are being forced to possess.
who has gone through no training, they could be full-grown clone as long as now there does exist technology out there that could shield the pineal gland from a soul latching onto it,
Mhm.
and giving that clone body its own soul. We don't have that technology right now.
Well, what goes on is they use technology to grow the body in under 24 hours, and it's simply not time enough for the mind to grow. A mind,
Exactly.
a mind
It's an
takes
infant
time.
mind. It's an infant mind. What I'm getting at is as soon as that pineal gland is formed enough to be able to kick on, a soul from the astral plane can latch onto it,
Uh-huh.
thus incarnating into that body, whether it's clone or not. It's a twin body of the body it came from, but that
Yeah,
soul is not that person's soul. That's a different soul.
yeah.
What I'm getting at is there exists out there with other ETs technology that could shield the body, that clone body, from an outside soul coming in.
Mhm.
But we humans don't have that technology.
Well,
So we
what
have
we're
to
doing,
deal with the 20-year span of time where that soul that's embodying that clone will kick out the person possessing it
mm,
after a certain amount of time.
yeah,
And then
and that takes
they kill
about
the clone.
25 years, and that's why people are doing 20 and backs. It has nothing to do with your genetics. It has to do with how long it takes that clone to be able to push you out. So they kill the clone to release you.
After they kill the clone, and if you somehow dislodge and return back, they'll just kill that clone and grow you another one.
Yep. I had an altar that in my contract ended up being purchased by Nacht Waffen from Kruger. So this is the altar that served with Herr Mayor. Okay. We don't use his real name publicly. Okay. So I started off with Kruger, where I did the array that did deep space telemetry. I operated that array and did maintenance on it. And in times of battle, I was a fighter pilot. So I was assigned to a space station out in deep space. And this was with Kruger, who are military mercenaries. And Herr Mayor's ship was loosely attached to that space station. And so he would see me. And before anybody thinks that he thought I was just cute, I had an exoskeleton surgically implanted. So I didn't look human. I looked like
A
half of
Borg.
I looked like a Borg. So in one of the battles, I got hit from the front, and my computer screen, because we didn't have windows on these things, we had a screen inside that gave you the readouts, and my screen shattered and was stripping my skin off my body. And they got me back on board the space station, but the medicos said, we can't fix her. So they deliberately killed the clone. That altar came back to me here on Earth. 36 hours later, they came and pulled her out and put her in a new body. And that was who Herr Mayor bought her contract for Nacht Waffen to serve on his scout ship, his spy ship. And we had worked together, I guess, a year and a half. And I got exposed to an ET virus. And they literally put me down like I was a rabid dog. They killed the clone again. And again, the altar came back to me, and she was crying hysterically both times. And she didn't know what had happened. And they came and got her and put her in a new body, and she served out the rest of her contract with Nacht Waffen. because they couldn't put her in regen because the clone had no training. So the regen tanks would not work on her. So yeah, this is part of how I know what happens, is because I experienced it. So, you know, when you're sitting there and you know what one faction does and you have an altar that switches factions, then you see the actual differences, because that altar wasn't in my body. She was in a clone body, and she ended up being replaced twice. And when she finally finished her contract, they literally put a laser sword through her heart to end her contract. They killed the third body to send her home. Oh, it was hilarious too, because her mayor told her that he would see her in Valhalla, and she shows up here and she says, "Lou as Odin, I can accept, but there's no way you're Freya." So yeah, you know.
That's funny.
When she reintegrated was when the CIA broke my shoulder. They told me I was never to reintegrate another altar that was a navigator. So that was why they broke my left shoulder. And for those of you who wondered, that was a 4-hour repair surgery. So we're not talking, oh yeah, they broke her shoulder. They did. 4-hour surgery to repair it. So I still can't braid my hair. And it's been 3 years. So.
I remember when it happened.
Oh, yeah, I was considering quitting. They had killed 2 people that I cared about, and they had broke my shoulder, and at that point I was blackballed in the community. Anyway, nobody wanted to hear from anyone from Nacht Waffen. So I was going to quit. Hey, I get depressed too. Come on. And Alexander Cherkasov got a hold of me and he says, "I want to hear your story." I go, "Everybody wants to start off at Langley and they never get past there." And he says, "No, we're going to do a series of 12 and you can go as deep as you want to go." And I said, "Really? I don't have to do Penny 101 over and over and over anymore?" So yeah, I did the 12 with Alexander, and he shared his profits with me. He's the only one who has ever paid me for my work. Yes, Americans. It was a Russian who paid me. Think about that. The only one who has ever paid me for my work. Oh, Yuri Lear also shared his profits because his site is monetized. So, okay, 2 Russians paid me. No Americans have ever paid me for any of my work. In fact, for those of you who are out there going, yeah, you have a radio show, I pay to be on GERN. Really. What I put out comes to almost $50 a week to be on air. So it's not all to GERN. Some of it's my ISP. Some of it is Rumble, where I pay to upload the files. But yeah, it's almost $50 a week that I pay to bring you other people. So, you know, this is not something I do for money. This is something that I do because it needs to be done.
Right.
So anyway, we talked about altars. What was the other thing you talked about?
Touched on engines. And,
We talked about engines. We talked about hyperspace. We talked about
hyperspace.
altars. What was the other thing we were supposed to?
Phones. I think that's all you mentioned before this started.
Okay, those were the things that we wanted to talk about, and we've still got almost an hour.
And yeah.
So I know you spent time talking to Doris. Doris Neely, the CIA archivist. And she
I wasn't talking to Doris afterwards. I was talking to Daryl.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I chatted up with Daryl for a while after the show was over.
Okay. Yeah, that's personal stuff. You don't need to. Daryl can tell his own. I kind of take that attitude. If somebody's involved in this stuff, you just let them tell their own story. So,
right.
Okay. Now, when we have talked about the altar I served with. We have talked about the altar who grew up with the Draco. We have talked about the altar who was an engineer with Nacht Waffen, who helped design ships and engines. Do you have memories of altars on Earth?
Really just the Montauk and those few memories of the CIA.
Okay.
Let's see here.
Did you remember me at the CIA? Because I have no memories of that altar.
No, I don't remember you there. I have an image of you as a younger person.
Doris says I look just like I did then, but that particular altar was in a cloned body and I have none of her memories. So all I know is that Doris feels very familiar, like family, but I have no memories of her.
I have this one image of you. Don't know if it's a memory or not. There's no context around it yet, but it's of you in black pants, like office slacks, women's office slacks kind of thing. A white button-down shirt.
I used to wear that in college.
Really? Really?
Yeah, I used to wear that in college.
I think there was one where you had a black sweater on. Wasn't like an office thing. It was just like a black sweater.
I didn't wear black on top very much because it was too dark for my skin.
Well, this was CIA office attire.
Okay.
Had to have been.
Had to have been. In the 80s, yeah, they would have let us wear slacks then. Maybe the late 70s, but before that, women wore skirts. Always.
Right.
So unless you were working in the fields, and then you might get by with jeans. But It was before about 1975, pants were men's clothes, and it was considered cross-dressing. And so it was definitely not acceptable. Remember, I was raised in a Christian cult, and girls did not wear pants. So, yeah.
I have memories of a past life during World War II. A French woman that worked in the resistance, and she wore a lot of pants back then.
Well,
She was a radio operator. She intercepted German radio stuff.
Europe was a lot different than the United States. In some ways, we were more conservative than they were. I had a past life that involved Europe and World War II, and I was a German Jew, and that particular man has a mixed reputation. The public thinks he's wonderful, but the people who actually knew him thought he was a dick. And I have a lot of memories that are not public, and I tend to think that he was a dick. So yeah, I'll talk about him in private, but not on air.
Right. That I completely understand.
Although there was an incident where NSA agents kidnapped me to access him about a project that he had been involved with before he died. And I don't metabolize depressants, so they very nearly killed me during the process. And the tech figured I wasn't salvageable and was going to just ease me out. And the interrogators forced him to figure out how to save me. And I would have been 19, 20, that range, that age group. It was during the Nixon administration. So that was a good.
Like 69, 70. No, that would have been like 72, 73.
75, 76, that range.
That's right. You're younger than my parents.
A good 20 years after the man had died, they were looking for his research partner and could not find him. So because I'd been in SSP, they knew who I was past life. And so they had come and gotten me instead. But yeah.
I remember my my past life self that was a French woman in France during World War II. She was really obsessed with radio technology. It was an absolute fascination to her.
It was relatively new in those days.
She was self-taught.
You used to be able to learn things and present competency and be able to get a job. That changed somewhere in the late 80s to where you had to have the credentials to be able to get the job.
I know she didn't get the role she played in during World War II immediately.
Yeah.
The guys that were operating the radio were fucking it up, and they actually broke the radio, and they were gonna just chuck it, and she just starts fiddling with it after they've walked away, and she got it working. She was already knew better than they did. She not only got it working, she got it on the frequencies that it needed to be on. And these guys had no idea how radios worked.
Radio was a new technology in between World War I and World War II.
And she apparently knew German, so she was translating for them also.
A lot of Europeans will speak more than one language. In Europe, you can drive 50 miles and they speak another language.
Right.
And we don't have that in America. We don't have that in the Americas. You can drive from Nome, Alaska, all the way to Patagonia and only speak 3 languages.
You can drive from the East Coast to the West Coast, which is about 2,100 miles, and everybody's speaking the same language.
Yeah, and they don't have that in Europe. In the Americas, you can drive along the West Coast and you speak English the whole way till you get to the Mexican border, and then you're speaking Spanish all the way down. You might accidentally run across people who speak French, German, or Portuguese.
Or Dutch.
My
dad worked in South America. The Gulf helicopter company that he worked for, because he was a helicopter pilot in the Gulf of Mexico, they had sent him down to South America with his aircraft to work on rigs out off the coast out there. And I can't remember the name of the country, but they were all spoke Dutch.
Well, there are probably what used to be Dutch Guyana.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's where it was, Guyana.
So there are pockets of native languages all through the whole thing, but even the natives, most of them speak Spanish. In the United States, most of the natives speak English. In Canada, the same thing. So you have pockets where, like Quebec, where they speak French. Louisiana, where you live, some speak French. You have pockets in South America. There was a French Guyana where they spoke French. So yeah, there are pockets throughout the Americas where they speak French or Dutch or Portuguese, because Brazil speaks Portuguese. And but the majority of the Americas, you can go from Nome to Patagonia on English and Spanish.
Right. And all those people that speak other languages down there in South America are going to speak Spanish.
Yeah, and you can't do that in Europe. You can't do that in Africa. You can't do that well, you might be able to do that through the Middle East speaking Arabic, from Morocco to, say, India. You might be able to do that with Arabic, but a lot of them speak Pashto or Urdu or
Pashto and Sephardi and oh God, there's like dozens of Arabic offshoot languages.
Exactly. You've got whole regions that
if you go into China, there's 3 major languages that at least everyone is required to know to some degree, but there's over 500 different languages just within the country of China.
Yeah.
And those are all native languages.
Those those people don't understand what it's like to be able to drive 12,000 miles, half the planet, half the planet's diameter. They don't know how. This is something they can't fathom, that you can drive that far and everybody speaks two languages. This is, they don't get it. Where we don't understand that every 50 miles, they got another language. And so most
And how do these guys all function with each other?
Exactly. They function.
Their schools teach, like, every kid's got to learn like 5 different languages minimum.
Yeah. And in the Germanic countries, they all speak their language they learn at home, and they learn High German at school.
Right.
That's how they function. So nowadays they learn High German and they also learn English, because America rules the world, whether we like it or not.
Even every nation that has intercontinental flight paths, aircraft, all global aircraft pilots are required by global international law to speak English.
Yeah.
And you are only allowed to speak English over the aviation airways, on the radios.
So they are taught at least 3 languages: what they speak at home, the standard language for their country, and English. And they used to also be required to speak French, because French used to be the international language like English is now. So
for that, it was Greek.
They go to school, they learn all these languages, they watch us and they go, you guys are ignorant. Well, maybe. You do lose something when you're not required to think in more than one language.
Exactly.
So, are they right about us? Maybe. But, before they destroyed the school systems here, we used to have the best engineers in the world.
And then they started changing that into just creating automatons.
Well, what happened was my generation revolted, and they decided to stop teaching kids how to think, so we couldn't revolt anymore.
So it was you. You did it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it happened during the Reagan administration, and his secretary or undersecretary of education put out a book. I can't remember her last name. Her first name's Charlotte, but it's called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. And people should read it. It's insightful. And if you don't want your children to become slaves, you need to make sure they learn how to think. That's the bottom line. The schools are not going to do it. So if you want a child that's going to grow up into an adult that can think for themselves, you're going to have to teach them yourself, because the schools aren't going to do it anymore.
I keep telling people, the most important skill that should be started at the very beginning is problem solving.
I've got a lot of hell for it, but I really believe that math teaches logic.
The thing is that I've seen in schools, kids having so much trouble trying to learn the higher maths like algebra and whatnot, but then you teach those kids simple logical problem solving techniques and principles, they go back to that same education and suddenly understand it.
My mom flunked algebra. I come along, I took calculus, did decently. My mom tells me one day, well, I can't do algebra because I can't understand negative numbers. I go, Mom, negative numbers are just being in the hole. You understand it just fine. You just don't know what the words mean.
Right.
And she says, is that all it was? Yep.
Yep.
It was. Being in the hole. And she's just like stomping off, cussing. She eventually went and got her GED, and in the course of studying for it, she did really well in algebra the second time around. It was just she didn't understand negative numbers were being in the hole. You know, the red ink in the checkbook. You understand that just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's they make it harder than it has to be. Seriously. You know, they don't explain things in terms people can understand what they're talking about because they want to keep that knowledge for themselves.
It's like some of the posts I find and repost where it's like this video of somebody displaying this little math trick that if you'd have been taught it in school would have made things so much easier, but they wanted to take the hard way and made 99% of kids fear and hate math for that.
Oh yeah. Okay, there is an old name for it. It's called the Trivium. And it's called that because there are 3 subjects that together teach you how to think. They teach you everything you need to know to be a responsible adult. And they are grammar, which is words and how to use them.
Right.
They are logic, which is how to think in a straight line and understand problem solving. And the other one is rhetoric, which is how to see through the bullshit.
They got rid of that a long time ago.
Yeah, so the 3 of them together make up what used to be called a classical education. And they are still being taught in those elite private schools. They are still being taught to the kids of our leaders. They are still being taught to the kids of our corporation CEOs. It's just your kids, they're not teaching it.
Right.
There is a reason that elementary schools used to be called grammar schools. They were supposed to teach kids the use of words, the real use of them, what words mean, how to use them. They're not called that anymore. They're called elementary schools. They're called primary schools, secondary schools. They're not called grammar schools anymore because they're not teaching grammar.
Here, when I was growing up, they were simply called grade school. It was grade school, junior high, and high.
Yeah, well, when I was growing up, they were grammar schools.
Right.
And I'm, like you said, I'm younger than your parents.
Only by a year.
Yeah, well. So we have changed that much in one generation. We're changing even more in the generation following yours. I see some of the work that the kids are doing in my complex. You know, we don't have many kids here. We have a couple of them. And they're no longer doing work on paper. They're doing everything on a laptop that the school provides.
Or a tablet.
Yeah. And so they don't know how to write. They don't even know how to print. There is the eye-hand coordination of the hand using the pencil to write on paper.
When I was a kid, before I even started kindergarten, before I was 3 years old, 2 and 3 and 4 years old, able to write perfect script. My mom even called it art.
Cool.
As soon as I hit kindergarten, my teacher would slap my hands when I would do projects, follow along. Everybody else is learning print, and I'm doing it in script, perfect, beautiful script. And even if I go to write my name, my mom would call it artwork. My signature was in perfect script. I would get slapped at school in the hand every single time, and the teacher would say, "We're not learning that. You need to follow along with the class."
That's teachers.
And it got so bad that I had actually forgotten how to write and even read script. I can to this day not read script.
Well, I think that's part of the goal, is to disconnect the generations, because the summer between 8th grade and high school, my father decided that I was taking too many science classes, that I was getting too masculine.
Masculine.
So he took the money to pay for art classes for me. And I took calligraphy. And my handwriting these days, I have the handwriting that I just write, and then I have how I sign. And my signature looks like calligraphy. And my kids will come along. Nobody writes like that anymore. So
my signature,
I go,
my signature these days is no longer legible ever since college. My signature has become no longer that. And my signature looks like something a doctor signed.
Steph is my youngest, Stefan. And he informed me, it is my signature. It is not my name in cursive. It looks like an earthquake squiggle. Okay, kid. So, yeah. Generations.
Right.
Things that mattered to us, I think, were deliberately twisted. But because my generation valued being able to think critically, it was taken away from our kids. And it was done in the name of workers don't need to think. Workers need to be able to do their jobs. That was literally how it was sold when they changed it in the public schools. We need workers who can work in factories. And then they closed the factories. And you've got all these people that don't know how to think, so they don't know how to retrain themselves for something else. And you can't just retrain yourself and show competency anymore. You have to have credentials.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be self-taught anymore.
And so
you've got to have this certification that somebody else decided this is what we want you to know. This is how we want you to deal with that information. And I think that all the greatest thinkers in the world were all college dropouts or high school dropouts that all self-taught themselves. Every Fortune 500 CEO right now was a college dropout and never finished.
But their employees are all in the top 10.
Right.
Yeah, because employees in the top 10 are taught to do what they're told. They may be smart as hell, but they've been taught to submit. They have been taught to comply. They have been taught to follow the rules. And that means they'll do what the boss tells them. They make wonderful employees. They don't make good bosses.
Yeah.
The other thing that people don't realize is that those dropouts are mostly, oh gee, geeky nerds, I believe is what the term is.
I'm one of those people.
So am I.
Yeah.
I
But yeah, you're right.
I have no problem with geeky nerds whatsoever. I think the term is sapiosexual.
What?
That's
The first
when
one on me.
that's when you really get turned on by smart people. So
No, I don't like dealing with people that are not intelligent. It's not whether it turns me on or not.
I have people in my world who are
Like talking to people who are not intelligent that can't keep up.
I have people in my world who are of average or lower intelligence, and I keep them around to keep me grounded. It's really easy to lose track of the common reality if you're not interacting with anyone who lives it.
I can admit I do have that tendency
So it's
to lose my grounding.
really easy to turn into a total shithead if you've lost that grounding. And I've seen it happen way too many times. So I do deliberately keep people in my world who are not as smart as others, who are having a hard time, because I need that grounding. And that sounds worse elitist than most of the things that I've heard complained about. But it's because I don't want to be that elitist that only talks to people at my level. You know, there are plenty of times that I'm the dumbest person in the room. And a lot of the things that are talked about simply will not work for those average people. And I don't want to be one of those people that makes solutions that don't work for everybody. I think that's why we let everybody vote, is because the solutions have to work for everybody, not just the smart people. I hope that makes sense. I mean, I live in an apartment complex with 8 other apartments, and I've interacted with the neighbors, and Lou and I are obviously the smartest people here, and they think I'm weird.
Smart people are always seen as the weird oddballs out.
You see the world differently than they do, therefore you're dangerous. That's the usual. And I don't want to be that person.
If education would be better off, and people would be taught to think logically, to problem solve, that gap would be a lot smaller.
Well, I'll put it in the terms that I see. These people get up. One of them gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go to work. They go to work. They work 8, 10 hours a day, plus driving time. both ends. They come home, open a beer, order a pizza because they're too tired to cook. They continue to drink beer until well after dinner. Then they light up their pot and they go to sleep in front of the TV. They'll wake up 2 or 3 hours later and head up to bed. They do this every day. This is their life. Now, if my solutions to things don't work for that life, they're not going to work.
Well, for me, for the last 3.5 years, before my accident at work, that was my life, minus the beer and weed. That you just basically explained my past 3 years in a nutshell.
They don't think. They veg out in front of the TV. They drink enough beer they couldn't possibly think. And
for me, it was.
If I'm talking to them, I'm way over their heads, and they just, their eyes go blank, and they're not hearing a word I'm saying.
I know at work nobody could ever understand me. But yeah, it was just, work was just, work was, last 3 years was so exhausting, so overwhelming. It was hard to get me into an interview because I was just so busy. And if I wasn't busy, I was exhausted just trying to recuperate so that I could make it back to work.
Yeah.
Putting in 12 to 14-hour days and then having an hour drive each way.
Yeah, I remember. And trying to get you to talk about what you were remembering when you were in that mode was like pulling teeth.
It was just really hard because.
But you wanted to talk. And
wanted to talk, but it was just so exhausting. It's like I had no time to think for myself. I felt like a slave. I had no time to think for myself. No time to do anything that I wanted to do at home, even if it was just to cook for myself. No time for hobbies at all.
Yeah, you were lucky if you had
time to
clean up the kitchen.
That's not living.
No. But yet that's how most people live. That's how most people in the world live. And then we try to tell them, well, this is happening out in space. And they're like, so?
How does that affect me?
How does that affect me? Why should I care? Why should you care? Because your kids may be taken. Well, if I don't see it happening, it's not affecting me. Well, it will affect you if your kid comes back with alters and behavior issues. My kids came back with alters and behavior issues.
Yep.
And it doesn't even have to be white folks descended from European royals. It's any group that has psionic abilities, or as the rest of the world calls it, witchcraft.
Pretty much.
So, yeah, that if you have witches in your family, your kids may be taken, and then you're going to have to deal with a kid that is suddenly really hostile and has alters and doesn't remember doing the shit to you that they've done. And you're going, didn't Penny warn us about this? Yeah, you smile because you know exactly what I'm saying. I've been public.
Oh, yeah.
I've been public for 6 years. And I have had people quote to me my own words, only they made them backwards. I've had people tell me all kinds of crap that other people said, only they're telling me that I said it. And I'm like, nope, I never said that. What words were used? Oh, so-and-so said that. Are you sure? Yep.
I get people all the time. They'll try to quote interviews that I've done back to me and ask questions about it. I'm like, I never said that, but I know what you're talking about it because it's close enough to this. And what you're asking means nothing like what you think I said. These are the words I used. This is what I said. This is what I mean. And they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. So your question is now completely a moot point.
Yeah, the problem is that I use concepts that they can't understand, and you use words that are technical, and their minds, their
Yeah, I
eyes
know.
glaze over and their ears stop listening, and they think they understood. And it's really hard for me because I go to this conference once a year, and they'll come ask me questions, and they're not listening to what I say. They're listening to how it relates to what they want to do.
Right.
I've had the last, okay, I've been doing conferences since 2018. Usually one a year. And the last couple of years, it's gotten really in my face. They are talking to me, trying to get me to verify their story so they can go public. But they don't have any memories.
They're telling you other people's story.
They're coming to me and they're saying, well, I have this, this, and this, and I had a dream about that. So what was I in? Because they want to go public because they think that they're going to get money. Sorry, guys, I've been paid by 2 Russians. That's it. Less than $1,000.
Never been paid at all.
In 6 years, less than $1,000. I would have made more money at Wally World. So
I've never been paid for coming forward at all. If anything, it's made my life worse.
it does. It makes your life a living hell because everybody thinks you're batshit.
I do it because I'm on a mission. I don't do it to make money.
I'm doing it because I want your kids to not be kidnapped. I don't want any more kids mind fractured. I don't want any more kids serving in space. Everything we do out there can be done by consenting adults and should be done by consenting adults who get paid. No more kidnapping kids, no more slavery.
I find it hilarious. These people keep commenting, where's my retirement money? Where's my paycheck? I'm like, I was promised this, that, and the other. I'm like, no, you weren't. I wasn't. I was a slave from the beginning. They knew what they were going to do with me before I was born.
Yeah.
I was a complete slave and never had a choice. I was used, abused, and then sent back here.
I was used, abused, sent back here, taken again, sent back, taken again, sent back.
Why aren't we all?
I know of at least 90 versions of me that are out in space right now.
I am
currently 60 and backs.
I am currently at almost a dozen altars, and that's not including the more primal, simple altars that can't be used in that function that I am aware of.
There are. I've reintegrated 32 altars.
I haven't
And
reintegrated anybody yet.
about half of them have been what you describe as primal. They simply store the trauma of what
Trauma,
created
yeah.
them.
Some of the
And
ones,
those are like you're just dealing with sheer pain.
the ones that I deal with, they are, they're used, programmed to be used as kind of like gatekeepers in my mind. They're used to scare me, and they're like, they've acted like demons and whatnot, but then I start showing them affection and love, and I'll grab a hold of them no matter how much they scare me and be like, it's okay. You know, I'll tell them, you're not alone anymore, and I'm not afraid of you.
I had one
And
who
they will
was
start to break down in my arms and start crying.
I had one who was a ship's captain, and there was a training session that was supposed to teach them to become used to being around blood or bleeding themselves. And she was killed by in this session, her skin was stripped off with scalpels. And so she bled out, and they didn't reanimate her. She wasn't put through regen, so it was an American group. And the altar, when she first came back to me, she would just sit and rock and scream in the back of my head. And Lou used to ask me why I didn't do something about her. And I said, because she's part of me. And I would take the time to, like you said, I would put, because she was more of a mental, I would mentally put my arms around her and just hold her while she rocked. She still rocks. She just doesn't scream anymore. I don't know if that's good or bad that she's not screaming, but it's good for me because I'm not going crazy hearing her scream. So
One of my altars.
People who think that this is a good way to live are clueless.
They are. One of my altars takes on the shape of a giant spider. And when I stopped being afraid of it and started realizing that this is an alternate personality of mine, and it stopped attacking me, it stopped being aggressive. It's like acting like a pet now. But when that happened, it started sharing its memories with me, and that's when I started remembering being put in. It's almost like a fish tank, just big enough for me to lay in, and they would dump poisonous spiders and centipedes and other things onto me. And that's what created that altar.
I can see that creating an altar.
And the altar that was created from the eating a child took on the appearance of a clown. And I remembered my earliest memories. I've always been terrified of clowns, and I could never understand why my parents, before I actually have memory, before I can actually remember, my parents told me stories of, before I could even remember, of me being absolutely terrified of clowns. If one came near me, I would start screaming in terror.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never been particularly fond of them either. I think it comes from what was done to us.
Years ago, I had some friends, it was a husband and wife, and they owned their own business, and they were clowns. children's parties and whatnot. That's what they did. And anytime I would come by and they're in their uniform, I just couldn't speak to them, couldn't even make eye contact.
Well, we've got a couple of minutes left, right around 5. So if there's any contact information you want to give people, I'm pretty sure you have a blog.
Yeah, I do have a blog. It's been like what, 4+ years since I've even typed anything up on that blog. I've got a lot more recall now since then, but yeah, I really need to stop procrastinating and get back into updating that thing. It's on Facebook. I call it my SSP, my labs journal.
Okay.
Yeah, I am on Facebook and on MeWe. And
I have a lot of trouble making myself post on the SSP pages, mostly because every time I've had one get successful, Facebook has deleted it.
Wow. I have to keep putting up. It's like I have to keep putting up every video now. Every time you put out there that I've got a new video coming up, before it even comes out, I've got 30 new friend requests within 24 hours.
Okay.
And nobody talks to me. And I need to tell everybody, look, I'm not going to accept your friend request if you're not going to initiate verbal contact. You need to talk to me, let me get to know you, and let me see if I actually want to accept your friend request. That might be a dick move, but that's reality.
Reality is I have the number of friends on Facebook that I want to have. I really don't see a need to have more. I'm perfectly content with my between 1,100 and 1,200 friends. I have more than that following me. I have more than that pending friend requests, and most of them have never contacted me. I have hundreds of people on my wall who never interact with me, don't even like anything that I post. And it's like, why are they there?
Out of everybody in my friends list, there's several hundred. Maybe a dozen of them actually will like my posts and comment from time to time. The rest of them, I don't even think they watch my wall at all. They don't interact with me at all, and I have stopped. I've wondered what's the point in them being there, and so I don't accept friend requests if you're not going to first initiate contact with me directly, through Messenger or whatnot, talk to me.
I have a problem with Messenger that people send me videos. Video after video after video after video after video, and that most of them are politics or religion.
I have had to block a lot of people that will send me stuff that is all about new agey whatnot, hugabaloo, or that Q crap and the like,
Yeah, I'm gonna just flat out say, if all you are friends with me for is to send me political crap in Messenger, don't bother.
There are people that keep asking me, they'll go on my blog and they'll ask me if I've contacted Gaia yet, or if I've contacted Emery Smith, or other
Yeah.
people. And I'm like, I've spoken with them. I have no plans to contact Gaia. I've spoken with some of the individuals that they mentioned, not all of them. And
Well,
then I'm like,
we're a community, and some of us have interacted with each other, but that doesn't mean that we're buddy just because we're
exactly.
similar things. I do have a group of actual friends who are in our community. You're one of them. Um, yeah, I do screw around on your wall on a regular basis.
Oh yeah.
um, but yeah, I get, well, why don't you have so and so on your wall? I mean, on your show. And it's, well, so and so only talks religion. Well, my show is about 3D real military black ops. It's not about religion. Well, why don't you have so and so on? And well, so and so basically sits there and tells me I'm full of shit. um,
I wouldn't pay to have somebody on my show and do that to me. You know, if you want to have a very respectful debate,
I
that's
have
awesome.
I have paid for people to be on my show only to have them come on and tell me that I was delusional. And I have had that probably about a quarter of the shows I've done.
I've watched some shows of a few people that you've had on there where I'm watching the show and I'm typing to use like, well, so and so just said this, that's bullshit.
Uh-huh,
So
uh-huh.
and so just said this, that's inconsistent with this particular information that I'm aware of. So
Yeah,
and so said this, well, that's completely opposite to what I remember.
yeah. I'm sitting there and half the time I'm biting my tongue because they're on my show. I'm being polite. Anyway, we are at the end of our time, a little bit over. So I hope Cowboy Bob doesn't blow his stack at me. Anyway, thank you for coming,
Thank you for
and
having me.
always a joy. Thank you for audience for listening.